This is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Planning Board of Township of Montclair. In accordance with the New Jersey Open Public Meetings Act, notice of this meeting has been provided by posting a copy of the notice on the first floor of the municipal building, and by sending a copy to the newspaper designated by the township for notices. Electronic notice is given by way of the township website, and excuse me, website access is also given on, instructions for website access is also given on the main floor of the municipal building. The meeting is broadcast live on Channel 34 and is streaming live and will be available on demand on YouTube. This meeting is a quasi-judicial proceeding, meaning that the board has powers and procedures that resemble a court of law, and we are obligated to objectively determine facts and draw conclusions from them in order to provide the basis for official action. Any questions or comments must be limited to those issues which the board may legally consider in reaching such decisions, and decorum appropriate for a judicial hearing must be maintained at all times. First thing on our agenda this evening is our roll call.
Vice Chair Brodock.
I'm here.
Mr. Graham.
Here.
Mr. Ian Wally.
Here.
Ms. Lockman.
Here.
Mr. Ortiz is excused. Mr. Pierre is excused. Ms. Willis.
Here.
Chair Nguyen.
Here.
Mr. Jacobson's excused, and Mr. Neiman.
Here.
Okay.
All right, we have minutes from the May 22nd meeting.
So, are there any changes to the minutes?
I didn't get them.
I know you didn't get
Yeah.
them.
I got nothing.
I apologize for that, so.
It's okay. As long as Ms. Lockman reviewed them, then I'll be okay.
I must admit, did I send you anything? I didn't. I'm not sure I reviewed them.
Okay, they should have been in your package because I couldn't send them digitally, so.
Yeah,
So that's
I
a,
don't think I did. So I don't know if we want to wait till next go round since we didn't look at them really.
Well, yeah, the one, I have them here, I've looked through them, I thought that they were straightforward, but there are 14 takeaways from our conversation about the master plan reexamination report, so it might be good if,
yeah.
Why don't we-
it might be good if you do look at them, because it kind of goes, it's more than minutes, it's part of a process in a way, that these are the, right, correct me if I'm wrong, these are the key items that we focused on, Janice?
Right,
Yeah.
right, so let's, yeah, we could just table it for the next meeting,
Yes.
that's fine.
Thank
Agreed.
you, and I'm sorry,
I'm sorry I didn't look at them, I just, I was
That's okay.
focusing actually on the report again, I did.
I know you're used to getting them in digital
Yes.
form.
Right.
Don't let it happen again.
Okay.
But-
It's a female thing, we apologize and apologize.
No, that's fine. We have resolution for 103 Grove Street.
Which, they were, and we got a request to carry it to the 26th, which is after I had put together the agenda.
Right.
So that'll be carried,
All right.
Getting the agenda is what prompted me to send that email to Sean.
yeah. Okay.
And I believe that brings us to our master plan reexamination report conversation continuing.
Does everybody have a copy of the report? Okay. So, yeah, so for tonight's discussion is the report from the Flexible, Affordable, Urban, Suburban Lifestyles, AKA Housing, Subcommittee report. Members of that subcommittee were Kevin Pierre, Kevin Ortiz, and unfortunately, neither one of them is here tonight, Carmel and Jacob Neiman. So, we can just start going through the report. I can go through the report, starting with the issues, and then we can move on to the recommendations, because I think there's a lot of data in here.
Just Janice, can I make an initial suggestion that maybe we change the name of that section to housing? It's
That's
kind
what,
of,
yes, I
yeah,
agree.
yeah.
It's a mouthful right
it's-
now.
And it doesn't really indicate what the report is really about.
Yes. So that'll be recommendation number 1, change it to housing. Okay. So, again, we're reviewing the issues that were identified in the Unified Land Use and Circulation, Unified Land Use and Circulation Plan, which was originally, work started on that in 2010. It was completed in 2014. It was adopted by the Planning Board after many revisions in 2015, and as you know, it's been amended every other year or so since then. So these are the issues that were really identified as part of the original community outreach that took place in 2010, 2011, maybe 2012. And number one, under housing, is that there isn't enough diversity in terms of the types and price ranges of housing available in Montclair. So I think the response was this is not an issue, this is not fully an issue, because what we did find in reviewing the housing types at the subcommittee level, if you look on table 1, is we do have a lot of diversity in housing types. Units in structure, we have about a little less than 50% of our housing units are in one-family homes. About 3.8, one attached, those are townhouse units. So we have a few townhouse units. It's not a large number, about 4%. 12% are two-family homes. And then we have 3 to 4, 5 to 9, 10 to 19, and finally 20-plus units per building. So there is a good distribution there. And that distribution is somewhat the same as what we had in 2010, because Table 1 compares 2010 to 2021. Our housing stock is older, as you can see in the year that the housing units were built.
Janice, can you clarify that? It looks like in some of the years, like if you look at 1970 to 1979, for example, there's 578 units in 2010, but then there's 727 in 2021. I was just a little confused. I can see why it would be reduced, like there's demo of some of these houses,
Yeah.
but does that mean it's built in the style of 1970 to
No.
79 home, or
No.
how are there more homes from 1970 to 79 in 2021 than
It's
in
a good
2010?
question, and I can't answer that.
Okay.
It might be that the data in 2021
Oh, I
was the
see.
ACS data. The 2010, I don't know if the 2010 was ACS data or the 2010 census, but again, that would have been a data issue.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question?
So if you look at like 1970 to 1979, for example, it shows in 2010 that we had 578 units built from that decade. But then if you look at the 2021 number, it says we have 727, which it
Right.
wouldn't really make sense why we would have more units, unless we went back in time.
It might
It
have
doesn't
been-
quite
it
make,
also-
yeah, it
I
could be a
think
data issue, yeah.
These are dependent on personal responses,
Oh, I see,
so it might have
Okay.
been in how people responded.
yeah.
I mean, I'll take a look at that to make sure it wasn't an error in putting the numbers in the table. But
Yeah.
remember, with the census, that's people filling out forms. And sometimes there's errors made or difference of opinion when the houses were built.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Understood. And then just one more question. So if you look at like the number of units, like units in a structure, 5 to 9 units in a structure, is that saying we had 1,169 buildings with 5 to 9 units, for example? Or
no, I think those are units. The
Just
number
the-
of units that were in the kind of structure.
That had
has
5 to
5 to
9.
9 units
I
in the
see.
building.
Okay.
Again, these are all self-reported as part of the census,
Oh, units in structure, I see.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
okay?
Other than the census quirks from data, would there be an explanation as to why the 3 and 4 family house kind of number tumbled pretty precipitously, about 30%? Is that people moving 3-family to 2-family dwellings? Was there a change in code enforcement on that, or something like that?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know why the reported number went from 1,800 to 1,300. That's about, a loss of a little over, almost 500.
Yeah.
Anecdotally, I know a lot of multifamily houses that went that were originally single-family houses, they got split up,
Yeah.
and then they got bought, renovated, and turned back into single-family houses.
Right.
Yeah.
And then vice versa. There were some very large houses that were converted into condominiums
Right.
and expanded on. So it probably had part of it in addition to the variation that we get, because, you know, the fluctuation in the numbers is a little bizarre.
Yeah.
But that's part, that, with that particular point, that's probably part
Yeah.
of the reason why.
I wonder what the census sample size is for this, because that could really skew things, you know. The ACS covers a lot of people, but in a town like Montclair, it's only going to get how many in any given year. So I'd
Right.
be curious about that, because that could explain some of it too. If you have like 2 extra people saying their house was built in the 70s, extrapolated out, that suddenly throws everything off if the sample's too small.
It could be, but it was enough that they reported it.
Of
as
course,
being
yeah.
Statistically significant, so.
Yeah.
So my sense of this table is, you can't just put it here without an explanation, because, you
Well, then
know,
I'd have to
there's
put an
opening too
explanation
many
in for every
questions.
single table in terms of how, the data?
Well, or take it out. I mean, or take some of it out, extract. You don't need all this information if it can't be explained. It's just raising
one
more
thing-
questions than it's
The
answering.
one thing that I took away from
Yeah.
it is that there is kind of some stability. Because yes, there's fluctuation, but from 2010 to 2021, they're in the same ballpark. The numbers are in the same ballpark. Yeah, there might be a few hundred this way or that way, but they're pretty close, and it's not like it went from 5 to 500 or 5 to
Right.
5,000. It went from 500 to 600 or something like that. You know, it's
I-
really not dramatic differences.
I think it does tell the story. What we're trying to look at is the diversity in housing type or lack thereof, which was identified as an issue. And what this does show is that we do have a wide variety of housing types. I think that's the benefit of it. The change for each category, that's really hard to track, as you can see, because some of these numbers raise questions.
Yeah, some went down, some went up, but overall, it's kind of balancing.
But don't you think some comment to that effect in the report might be helpful? And we all had kind of the same question about what is this, you know, the status
not
seems a
quite
little
sure
bit
what-
unreliable.
Well, you mean as to how we're interpreting the numbers?
Yeah,
A
yeah.
statement?
Yeah,
a
something
statement in
about
the
it.
report,
Yeah.
You know, like, you know, we note that there's these differences,
Yeah.
and this is how we're taking it, this is how we're perceiving it.
Yeah, I would like to see something like that. I think it would be helpful to the reader.
I wonder if it's not more helpful to just not put the percentage change. Because if the goal, like, if we are not as a board 100% confident that that is if we just have any sort of questions, we don't need to tell people to change. We've got the data in front of them. If they want to do the math, they can do the math. But it seems that percentage change column is the one opening the questions.
How about if you just take out all the years, because that's where the vagaries are. Because the years when a house was built is not really material. What is material is the total housing units, and vacancy rate and units in structure, right? Because that's went from 15,513, pretty stable actually, it's 15,513 to 15,592. So you're not really drawing any conclusions about.
Tony, is your mic on?
Oh, I'm sorry. You're not really drawing any conclusions about, like, who cares what year it's built? You just
Except
really.
it does show, you know, we do use the age of housing as an indicator of housing condition. If you have an older housing stock, it means that there's a greater need for home improvement programs, much as the one that we have right now, which it's like
Is that
a home
stated?
rehabilitation program, because as we all know, the older the house, the more expensive it is to
Well, then, how about if
maintain.
you just use the current, don't put in 2010 then for the age of the house, because the age of the house is relevant at
Right.
one point in time, and that would be now.
That's true.
And that way you'd get you don't have to compare the.
But it does show the newer, right? The 2010, 2019 is interesting that we have 439 newer units, right? And then compare that to what we've done the last few years. How many have gone in, you know, since 2019? It's been a few hundred, right? So I think that's interesting data. I think it all, to Carmel's point, we have a little bit of explanation. All of this can provide a picture that
Right.
is helpful to understanding our housing stock.
Yeah, so that goes in, that would be in favor of just eliminating the 2010 numbers and just putting in the 2021 numbers. Because it'll show that there's 439 built in the decade between 2010 and 19.
Yeah, I just think the more, data, as
You don't
long
have
as
to
we're
worry about-
explaining it.
Because it does
you know.
look a little bit odd as to, because you'd say, like, in the example with the 1970s, you could say, well, maybe some of those houses were subdivided, that's why there's more units now, but then it's an awful lot of subdivisions, 500
Yeah,
subdivisions to,
can't
or
all-
whatever, or I'm sorry,
Right.
Yeah.
200
Can't all be
subdivisions.
that.
And then going from 1458 down, I don't know.
My own opinion would be that leaving.
Caroline, is your,
It's on, but my own
If you
opinion
just
would
move
be
it
that
close.
keeping the year is kind of important. And that the flaws in the data, I would prefer to have the paragraph that kind of summarizes
right,
how the data varies and why. But I don't want to take the year of the housing out, because I think it's, tells us too much about the age of our housing stock to ignore.
okay.
Saying that, but just not having the comparison of the columns.
Only have the
Just have the
latest
years-
numbers, not have the 10-year.
Just have the
numbers.
2021 numbers, which would still show the year of the houses, but just not show this very confusing change between the same houses going between, their condition in 2010 versus 2021. So just have all this stuff here, but just not that comparison, because we're not really saying anything about it. Oh, actually, we're already talking too much about this. One question one, go back to my phone. It doesn't matter.
Okay. So that's just one side of the diversity, the housing diversity issue. The other issue is prices. And,
Is that the main issue?
and I have to, somebody pointed out to me that the housing values in Table 2, which are, again, derived from the census, they're self-reported. This might have been coming from you, Jake. Janice, these numbers don't make sense.
No.
Housing values and prices are really much higher. And I'm like, you're right, and I probably should get it straight from the tax assessor's office. So I had my staff reach out to the tax assessor's office early last week to get the data. And, we can download all the data, and we have the housing types on a database and come up with the numbers. But for various reasons, they were unable to get that data to me for tonight's meeting. So all I can say is we're working on it. I would have loved to have presented to you I was going to use the equalized assessed value from 2010 and 2021. I thought, and Jake, you were the tax assessor.
Yeah.
That's probably the best source.
It's the best we're gonna do in the circumstance until
Right.
Montclair does another reval. It's the
Right.
best
So
we can do, yeah.
let's set that aside for now until we get the correct data and we're able to present it to you. And I think that'd be a much better discussion in terms of housing values.
And I think we have a pretty good idea of what
Hi.
the actual numbers are these days.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Um,
Janice, are you moving
Yeah, go
on?
ahead.
Yeah, no, I asked you to show the map, which is gone, because I think it visually indicates a point that's really missing from this report in its entirety. And I'll wait till you get it up. Okay. So while we didn't discuss this in our subcommittee meeting, if you look at that map, and you look at the light green, I don't even know what to call the colors, but the light green,
That's the RO area.
Oh, like the mint?
the beige, yeah,
This
the
is the
beige
RO,
color.
the state area.
Let me just say my point. If you look at that map, the thing that jumps out at you is that within Montclair, I don't know what percentage of the land in the town is zoned single-family. And that's the issue that causes the
that data for you.
lack of affordability or lack of units built. And I'm not advocating for any, that we change all the zoning, but as a, trying to represent the citizens here and giving them a voice, you cannot deny that the issue with the town is that we have so much space in the land of Montclair that's reserved for single-family homes. And that's why you're clustering your commercial areas, but I'm not talking about commercial areas right now, but you're clustering your multifamily homes in certain sections, and where there's vast swaths of land that is just single-family homes.
Well, that's exactly right. And
Yeah.
it's just a statement of fact.
Statement of fact, but
And-
I think the town, when they are people who are interested in this master plan, may come out and say, well, why are we doing that? Why are we
But the
having
t-
this type of
But the
zoning?
town, but hasn't the town, the majority of the town, really kind of told us that they kind of like the way
Well,
the town is?
that's what, right, well,
And they don't want to change the balance between, and that's why that's one of the reasons why we advocated for increased density in the commercial areas, because those were the areas that wouldn't accept this, that would not upset the single-family nature of the neighborhoods, which the township overwhelmingly seemed to prefer.
yes,
You
when
know,
we
so
did
it's
this, in
weird. It's-
2010. I mean, Montclair is always saying how progressive we are, and I dispute that we're progressive, but that we're a progressive town, our values are such and such, yet we have a town where you look at the size of the town, and you see that most of the land is dedicated to single-family homes, and I feel like, citizens, if they want to weigh in on that, do they still believe that that should be the case? I'm not giving my opinion, I'm just saying that this map obviously shows that, as you said, John, that we are a town that is predominantly single-family homes, and that's why we have an affordability crisis, and that for renters and
And
small.
if you go and you look, I mean, because it's all over the internet and the newspapers, about the average price of a house in this town, which is, astronomical. And if the average price is that, and you don't want to build, you don't want to disrupt the single-family houses, it's like, well, you can't devalue the whole town. I mean, you can't take a house that somebody has that's a $700,000 house and say, you know what, now we're going to say that's a $300,000 house, because that's just crazy. People will not stand for that, okay? So that's not a viable option. So what are your options? Your options are to put more affordable housing, but where are you going to put it? Well, if you don't put it where the single-family houses are, you're talking about the more commercial districts in the center city,
Well,
center town, kind of situation, which causes a problem, which we've discussed, about there being too much in one area, and it's a very difficult dynamic to negotiate, and I don't know what the answer is. I have no clue as to what the answer is to change it.
Well, I'm just throwing out there that we don't know what the town thinks about whether we should have this single-family zoning as it is.
It
We
is
really
in-
don't know. Anecdotally, and we know what our own feelings might be, but we don't know as a town, do we really still want this kind of, single-family zoning for the predominant space in the town? I don't know.
I think we should also, this is one of the reasons why this, I think, chart is important, because I was surprised to see the balance really between the single-family, one detached homes and the multi-families, right? If you look at table 1, if I'm reading this right, it's almost half and half, right? I know what you're saying, Carmel, about the land.
area.
No, understood, but, I mean, I would be hard pressed to think of what neighborhoods you'd want to start, changing that way. And we could find, the commercial spaces and, areas that would be more conducive to multifamily, but, again, I was surprised by the number of units being
It's
almost
also a
evenly.
little bit more than anecdotal. It's because we've had review after review. I mean, when's the last time we did an examination?
2016.
And again, that whole experience, that year that we held multiple hearings going over, we keep getting the same message, that people don't want you to disrupt the neighborhoods. I don't get any kind of sense that anybody is willing to, you know what, let's divvy up my neighborhood. Let's just, look at all the opposition we have when somebody wants to put another house on the street, an existing street, even though that house may be in the same, may be on a lot that's equivalent to all the other lots, you know, because they've subdivided. It's like, no, we don't want another house on this street. You know, I don't get another message about we're willing to disrupt that.
John, I'm not suggesting that we have the answer. I'm suggesting we're doing a reexamination of land use in this town. And I think a question, it's clearly a question, why do we have single-family zoning in whatever, 70% of the town?
Because that.
Yeah, but we
because
don't
I
know
think the
that.
answer-
Yeah,
I think,
yeah.
no, I don't, I disagree. Ask the real estate agents
Yeah.
in town. That's why people move to this town, because they like the neighborhoods.
But if you put, well, I was just going to say, you're assuming that if you start putting little multifamily houses in a single-family zone, that it's all of a sudden going to change the neighborhood and make it like outrageously awful.
I'm not assuming that at all, but I will say unequivocally that I have no doubt that we'll get the neighbors in here en masse saying just that. No doubt at all.
I don't disagree. I'm confident the neighbors will show up, but I also know that we're not necessarily here to implement the policy choices of the neighbors. I think it's important to consider that changing the zoning does not necessarily change the neighborhood. It simply expands the suite of options available to a property owner, and you can have a place with two-family zoning that has a lot of one-family houses, and you can have places that are zoned for apartment buildings with single-family homes. I don't know either that people solely come here for single-family homes, because as Michael pointed out, half the units are attached housing of some kind, right? And so a lot of people are coming here for that too. I think the diversity.
They're concentrated, right? Like those units are concentrated in specific
And
areas. And I think people, and this obviously anecdotally, but enjoy having their neighborhood, but also having the walkability of 3 interesting downtowns where there is more diverse housing stock, right? So it's a very unique community, right? We have 6 train stations, 3 downtowns, we have beautiful neighborhoods, and we also have interesting, multifamily housing in specific areas of the town. I think we do have to take into consideration the feelings of people from their individual neighborhoods. Like, I understand what you're saying, like policy-wise, we should be thinking, bigger picture, but we really have to consider the neighbors, feelings on their communities, their individual communities.
I personally think that what you're saying is not realistic, but from a standpoint of what we're doing here, I think that it's worth having the conversation and worth exploring, because, I acknowledge I could be wrong. But I've been on this board a long time, and I keep seeing the same kinds of things. I have a number of friends who are realtors. I kind of keep an eye on the real estate market as kind of like a hobby. You see who's moving into town, who's moving out of town, how the neighborhoods have changed, because I've lived here all my life, and it's kind of interesting to see how things have changed. The numbers that you have on the demographics of the population, it's interesting. Again, it's another story of kind of stability, and I was surprised that it was still that stable, because I thought maybe it had been disrupted in recent years. But it's been, if you look historically, there has been a certain amount of stability in the makeup of this town over the past 50, 60, 70 years. I think people buy in the neighborhoods because they want single-family houses. It's not that they come to Montclair. They come to Montclair, and the properties that they look at Montclair, that's what they come to Montclair for. And because we have a lot of single-family houses, you get a lot of people coming to this town who want to live in single-family neighborhoods with larger houses and more amenities and that kind of thing. You get another type of people who moves to Montclair because that it's got this transportation, transit hub, ease of accessibility into the city kind of thing going on. They're two different groups, and that group will have no problem going out, the latter group will have no problem going out into the single-family neighborhoods as long as they're not too far away from the train stations. But the people who are in those single-family neighborhoods, I just cannot imagine that they want multifamily houses coming into their neighborhoods, or apartment buildings, or any kind of structures that are less than what's already on their street, because that's year after year for over 25, 30 years.
Yeah.
That's what I've seen.
But John, we're identifying in the master plan issues.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah,
think
well,
that
I-
is an issue.
I think
And
that
I
we
think
need
it
to-
should be in the master plan,
Oh,
in
yeah.
our examination report.
I think
yeah.
though we need to kind of, I think we need to address it somehow. Just saying that it's an issue, it's always been an issue.
I think,
But we need to.
But
we need to do
affordability
something more.
has
It's like,
changed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We need to do something more and say, okay, if we're gonna do this, this is the consequence maybe. If we're gonna do that, this is the consequence.
But we haven't thought it through, I
Yeah,
think.
yeah,
But I think
but-
it needs to be identified as an issue, think about it, and make some commentary in
Yeah.
the examination report.
I
Yeah.
think where the subcommittee ended up, and I thought it was a really good point, is, we've had a lot of multifamily housing development. What we haven't had is small lot, single family.
Right.
And perhaps, and I'm jumping to the recommendations, one of the last things, we did recommend, look for opportunities to support starter homes,
Yeah.
which would be perhaps construction of small homes on relatively small lots.
Yeah,
which-
we talked about that, absolutely.
Right, and that's,
yeah,
so that's,
yeah.
I don't know where that would be,
Yeah.
but that's something where where opportunities may come up for that, we should look into it.
That's the
Yeah,
kind
yeah,
of thing
yeah.
I'm talking about.
Right, and that's in
as
our-
an as a here's the options that we have. If, I don't know whether it's 10 options that we, that realistically we might be able to pursue, or we only have 2 or 3 options. But we should kind of try and flesh it out for the people and say, this is what we see as, this is what we've got, here are options to deal with it. Each one of these options, though, has a consequence. So,
Right.
We need, I don't know, we need we need feedback from the public. Which of these consequences are acceptable to you, what aren't?
And I think we need to be clear that a consequence of so much of land being devoted to single-family housing, zoning, is increasing in affordability. Because I think so many of these conversations focus on the consequences of upzoning, right? But don't focus on the consequence of maintaining the present state, which is increased in affordability.
And we also have to outline what the benefits are to it also, because because automatically, you're gonna cram more people with negative.
Well-
There are positive things that do offset that.
But we're already doing that in the area of the town where there's a cluster of 2, 3, 4-family houses, where that whole Bloomfield corridor, where we built up and continue to build up and want to build up at Lackawanna Plaza, that has an effect on the 2-family, 3-family houses that surround it. And there's a justice issue here. Why are those people, the ones that are affected by this building up of the town, adding more units, maybe, some affordable units, whereas people in other areas of town where there's single-family zoning are not affected by this?
But we are trying, that's one of the reasons we had such robust discussion about the Lackawanna development, right?
Yeah.
Was to make sure that we're balancing those interests between the current homes that are there and also recognizing that this is an opportunity, that's a location where it does make sense to actually put in some additional housing. So finding that balance, it makes sense to start there at Lackawanna, and then I think build our policy options, as the chair stated, out
Maybe the numbers
from there.
the numbers also give a better perspective, because, I didn't know what the numbers were prior to this, now I see numbers here, you can theoretically, you could say, you know what? This is as good as it's gonna get, we have a balance, and maybe we have to find a different way to go about, I don't know, thinking outside the box, So it's a real issue, but we can't just keep saying, this is a problem, this is an issue, we need to address this.
I think everyone's on the same page with that.
Yeah.
I had another issue, a housing issue that came up the other day when I was talking to somebody who owns some property off of Bloomfield Avenue. And it was in multiple zones. And the question was, how to build, obviously on Bloomfield Avenue, we have our C1 zone, and then you have the adjoining zones, which I believe are R2. And, you know, one of the suggestions was, well, I know right now we have very limited opportunities for townhouses as housing options. And I said, perhaps you could design this property so you have your, larger building on Bloomfield Avenue, but going back on the side streets, maybe you could do some townhouses there, because I know we don't have a lot of that product here. We've got some on Bell Street, and we've got one on Orange, which was a conversion of, I think, of a historic house, and they added townhouses around that. And we've got some of it on North Mountain, I think it is, or Upper Mountain. But it's something there's not a lot of, and I don't know if there's a strong demand for townhouses, but it's certainly, if you want a home ownership option where you get, some open space with it, maybe that's something we should try and encourage.
Most of the town is built, so to build a townhome, you have to demolish something else or find a lot. I think an interesting study.
And I think in this case, they've already been demolished.
Okay. I think what might be interesting to look at, listening to, what's happening, suppose you take all the two-family zones, and many of the two-family zones were created when one-family homes, Clover Hill, where I grew up, they were all single-family homes, and then it became a two-family zone because they were all subdivided. So the zoning actually followed what actually was happening. Suppose you took the housing in the two-family zones at one date, where two apartments are permissible. Look at the housing stock that existed on one date, and then go 10 years later and see what happened where it's permissible, and see if more twos became ones or ones became twos, and then you would see what the effect is that people have had an opportunity, because like John, I've seen some twos turn into ones.
Yeah, that seems to happen on Clover Hill
So-
Place specifically. There's a couple,
So-
yep.
But they have I know the people I know who had twos that turned to ones, they always have the opportunity to go back to twos
Yeah,
when they no
but it-
longer need the whole house.
But without contributing capital to this, people are doing this, and I think it'd be an interesting exercise to see, without changing the zoning, where it is permissible, what's happening where it's permissible. Then you would know what the town is doing naturally.
Well, some of it is that the homes are being bought by others, by developers who take a two-family and take, I know of that on Elmwood Avenue.
Well, that would
Where
happen
where the
naturally,
developer-
yeah.
Where the developer says, but this will be more profitable as a one-family home.
As a one, yeah.
Even on Mission, I think there was a three-family home that was turned into a one-family home.
But the
And-
developers
it was
study, and they
sold.
know
Yeah,
that
that's right,
this is
but
what
what they're
people
doing is
want.
they're flipping it. They do that and they sell it. It's not that someone who owned the house decided that they would like to.
But it's still market forces at work.
That's
It's not-
right, it's
there's no-
market forces, is
at
what I'm
work.
saying.
And-
In fact,
and
it's
I
very
think-
interesting to look at the fact that there's very few two-family homes being built. We look at the statistic here that was provided, 606 multifamily units, 10 two-family were built since 2016. And I think one of the major things that's happening across the nation is that two-family homes are disappearing. They're not really being constructed. And those that exist, if the neighborhood will make more money for a developer with one-family home, then that's what happens to it.
I think it's important to consider that while a lot of this is driven by market forces, those market forces are living in an environment where we have zoned the community in a certain way, right? So whether that's a two-family zone or a three-family zone or a one-family zone, like the zoning has a big impact on all of these decisions being made. And so.
I don't mean to
Well, I'm
interrupt.
speaking
What
of
I'm-
two-family houses and two-family
Yeah,
zones
and
being
two-family
turned into
zones.
one-family houses.
Yeah, of course, but
Yeah.
like zoning is still having an influence, right? So like if you've got 70% of the town for a one-family house, you're gonna reach capacity on one-family houses at one point, and so people will turn two families into one families, or, I'm just saying, it's a natural progression in the environment we have created through the zoning code. I just think it's important for us to always keep in mind that there are rules and regulations that are impacting these market forces. And I think, that's all.
Yeah, I mean, a two-family, from a land use perspective, is pretty inefficient because there's a lot of setback area, there's a yard, there's driveways and so forth. You don't get a lot of, I mean, your example about townhomes are really efficient. Townhomes are very efficient from a land use standpoint because a lot of units are on a smaller area.
Right.
So that might be part of the equation as to why, just,
Well, actually, in terms of economic diversity, the two-family home is one of the best ways for a lower income person to buy into.
Yeah,
exactly.
So
Yeah.
the two-family home is a very important part of economic diversity.
Right.
In the South End, there are a lot of two-family homes that you don't know they're two-family homes.
That's right.
Because
Yeah.
they're, basically in an R1
Yeah.
zone, and they're
Yeah.
grandfathered in.
Grandfathered.
But for years, they've been two-family houses.
Right.
And if you know the people who live there, but just going by it, you would never know because it's sandwiched in between single-family homes. And they've been like that for
That's
for decades.
exactly right.
There's
Decades.
pockets of two-family zones all the way, up and down Montclair. It blends in, with the one family very well.
Which is my point. Why,
Yeah.
why have single-family zoning and not allow two families that look just like the single families?
Yes.
That's true. So I think coming from this discussion, there's a suggestion that we do a deep dive analysis of what's going on in the two-family zones. And I think we can look at that. What are the existing, within the two-family zones, how many of them are two families? How many are there one? How many are actually three? We'll take a look at that, okay? And perhaps we can answer these questions at the same time that we address the neighborhood character issue.
Right, because that was where I was
Yeah.
going, like, if you have a conversion from a single family to a two-family, and you don't know, it doesn't look like a two-family, it's not changing the nature of the neighborhood. And that's a major issue for the neighbors. Density is another thing, of course, you have to deal with, but, that whole thing about it not changing the neighborhood.
So that can be controlled, you can control that through your zoning, what things look like, but,
Exactly.
so,
So that's another one of those possibilities
yeah,
that we could.
if you want to have more housing in town.
Yeah.
And I guess the suggestion to look into, I just want to make sure the point is not missed that Carmel brought up about the influence that so much of the land being single-family zoned has on the affordability issues.
Right.
Because I know looking
I'll
into
have that-
2-3 families is important, but I want to make sure the issue Carmel brought up is not.
I'm going to do an analysis, the breakdown of acreage of land for each zone district.
Yeah,
And,
That's-
we can segue that into the neighborhood,
Yeah.
what is it?
Character, yeah.
Discussion,
Mhm.
subcommittee discussion.
I mean, I was almost thinking, you have 2 points here in the opening issues. You could make a third point, availability or whatever, I don't know what you want to call it, that describes the
They're
land,
largely built out, and the only thing we can do is
change the zoning.
increase the density on our existing
Yep,
land, zone districts.
yep. And I'm just saying it, not just because it's an issue that jumps out at me. I don't have an opinion one way or the other. I don't want the town to be up in arms that we're going to change single-family zoning.
No,
but-
no. I think I'm just trying to facilitate the board discussion.
Yeah, and we should discuss multiple options, as the chair noted, so.
Well, I don't want to lose Janice's earlier comment that having more opportunity for the smaller lots for one-family homes somewhere. I
Right.
think we have to remember that economic diversity also includes those beautiful large lots that are part of our community as well.
That's
And
true.
I don't think we want to lose that any more than we want to not
Right.
provide opportunities for people with less money to have a place to live.
And to the point about small lot development, infill development, so taking those small pockets that have remained undeveloped and like a single lot in, say, a 3-family zone and trying to encourage that lot be developed to match the maximum zoning allowed should be a priority as well, because that's otherwise just sitting vacant.
Which brings me to the issue, it's just so strange that recently the council passed the ordinance where they wanted to enlarge the size of a lot.
Right.
rather than keep it at the more modest size that we had. I don't know what the thinking was there in our
I
progressive
think the
town.
thinking there was, by doing the analysis that we did, they wanted the lot depth to match what the existing conditions are as part of protecting neighborhood character, which was one of the driving forces of the adopted plan. So
Oh,
we're
wasn't-
rethinking that.
Was that, didn't that come up recently? I thought it was only when there's a new road or something that went in?
That's true, when
Yeah,
there's a new road.
Yeah,
If they're
'cause it
doing a
wasn't-
subdevelopment.
It's
It
only,
wasn't
it only,
for-
it only
Yeah.
comes into effect when there's a new road.
Yeah, so that's in a very limited,
Well,
Exactly.
I will, I'll point out that there's 5 acres that's going to be available, that's totally demolished 2 houses on, is it Lloyd Road? So God knows what's going to go in there.
Right. Moving on to issue number 2, which it's issue number 2. Many current residents who want to stay in Montclair after their children leave the house face a lack of options in town for downsizing. It is becoming less viable for residents to live their whole lives in Montclair and less likely that future generations can choose to stay in Montclair. I think that underlined portion was a separate issue. I just combined them two into one because I think they're related. So the response, this is still an issue, and I said should be combined with issue 4, which I did here. The township has addressed this by adopting a new accessory dwelling unit ordinance in 2023 with more flexibility for owners of 1- and 2-family homes to provide accessory dwelling units and continue to expand the inventory of affordable housing. In addition, the township's affordable housing ordinance was amended in 2018 to include a local preference for all affordable units created through the township's affordable housing programs. So I think we have done a lot to address that very issue.
Janice, I had also, in my edited version, inserted in the beginning, the response, this is still an issue and should be combined with issue 4, you said, but then I inserted somewhat addressed as many of the new units provide some 2-bedroom apartments appropriate for residents downsizing. I think it's important to emphasize that people who downsize want 2-bedroom apartments. That's all you hear from the senior community, so that they can have 1 bedroom, a caretaker or a family member can have another bedroom, and that's an important thing to them. And you don't see that much in the new high-rise developments that we've had. They have some two bedrooms, but most of them are, if you look at Seymour Street, they're micro units, studios, 1 bedrooms, and some 2 bedrooms. But I think 2 bedrooms is what this community wants.
The prevalent size is 2 bedrooms.
Oh, but, is it? I mean, I'd like to know that.
Yeah, it is. Most of the units are 2 bedrooms. There's some 1 bedrooms and some 3 bedrooms, but most of them are 2, because that's the most requested unit size.
Yeah, I'd like to know that data, because I don't believe that was true on the Seymour Street development, because it was remarkable to me that people are building micro units and studios and 1 bedrooms, where 2 bedrooms was what people really wanted.
I can get that for you.
Yeah.
Number 3, one of Montclair's unique strengths is its diversity, both economic and social, and there is a danger of losing that diversity due to rising housing costs. Response: Montclair's racial composition is still diverse, but the township's racial composition is changing. As shown in Table 2, the township's Black African-American population declined by 8.8% between 2010 and 2020, while the Hispanic, Latino, and Asian population increased significantly, and the white population remained relatively static. In comparison, the Black African-American population in Essex County increased by 4.6%, while the white population declined by almost 22%, as shown in Table 3. The decline in the township's Black population is detailed in Table 4, which shows that the number of Black and African American residents actually peaked in the year 2000. This may be due to changes in the census, which added a new category for 2 or more races, starting with the 2000 census. On the economic side, Montclair is becoming wealthier, with median household income increasing by 55% between 2013 and 2021, from $96,000 to $149,000. This is a much more significant increase than experienced in Essex County and in New Jersey. So all that data is on page 4.
Yeah, I have some comments about that.
I know.
Yep, okay, so just starting off, I would say one of Montclair's unique strengths is its diversity, both economic and demographic, not social, demographic diversity, I think you mean. And then, as shown, the third sentence should say, as shown in table 4, not 2.
Yeah.
And just continuing on, won't talk about the 8.8% increase yet, but you don't have the Hispanic Latino numbers in that table. You're missing that, even though you comment on them.
In table 4.
Yeah.
This is some other race alone, but I noticed
Yeah,
that too.
they're missing that, yeah.
Latino
Yeah, and
numbers would be under ethnicity. It's not part of in the census, it's treated as ethnicity, not race. So you'd need to pull the ethnicity tables.
Well, for purposes of this report, do we
that's
have to be
fine.
as specific? I think we should just put it in table 4 somehow or other, yeah.
That's not for me to decide, but
Yeah.
it's a totally separate question. Race and ethnicity are treated separately, and Hispanic is covered in ethnicity,
Yeah.
not race.
All right, my only point is it's not covered in this table, where it should be.
Okay.
Though we do comment on it. And it was in another table, I don't know where it went.
I
but-
think I probably replaced
Oh,
that because
oh.
of the comments you made at the last meeting. So-
One
And
step
typically
forward,
they're
2
reported
steps back.
together. Ethnicity and race are typically reported together,
Right.
just on the same table, so
Yeah.
it'd be
Right.
helpful, yeah.
And I guess the point that I would make here is that, and you show this in the table, like I would talk about black alone and then black and other races, combine that, and then you see only a 3% decline in the black population. And you see an enormous increase in the Hispanic and Asian population. So in a sense, our diversity has, increased if you think about Asian and Spanish, but it's declined marginally for black people. So I don't know if everybody else agrees with that interpretation, but that's how I would look at it. And just the last point, I don't know why you're including Essex County. I think we should just
I
stick
think
to
you asked
Montclair.
me for comparison. What
Yeah.
the subcommittee asked me to.
did?
Yeah,
Oh, you did.
I asked for that because I think it was important. We need to understand as a 5 square mile municipality, we're very heavily influenced by the larger community around us. And so understanding the changes in Essex County more broadly and Newark and seeing whether the demographic changes in Montclair specifically were downflowing from there, from the broader community.
I disagree 100%. I think Montclair is its own little community, and we should just be looking at that. It kind of muddies the water to include the whole of Essex County, but we'll agree to disagree here.
I think the point is, the composition of our community is changing. That's what I was trying to tell to the subcommittee, and Montclair is changing in a different way than our other communities. We're very popular, and I think it's attracting wealthier people. I mean, you look at we didn't talk about incomes. When you look at how much the average household income in Montclair has changed over the last 10 years compared to Essex County and the state, ours has been a much more significant increase. And I think that's because the residents that are here already or that are coming, or have come recently to Montclair are much wealthier, or have become much wealthier.
But that's because they have to be wealthy to live here and to afford to live here, so it's like chicken and egg thing going on.
Right.
You have to be wealthier to live here, to stay here,
Yes.
and to buy it.
Right. I mean, taxes increase and increase and increase.
Yeah. So, I think what the question is, are we losing our diversity because of the increase in housing costs? I think the subcommittee's response was that our diversity is changing. And there was actually I know Kevin Pierre is not here, but he was very passionate about what's happening to the the traditional, Black African-American community that's been a part of Montclair for so many years, and that we do need to address the loss, the reduction in that traditional population in the township. And I think that was a large part of the reason why the judge, when we presented our Affordable Housing Trust Fund spending plan and asked that it include local preference, so that Montclair residents get a local preference for affordable housing opportunities in the township, which is highly unusual in other municipalities. But it's because we're losing that population that we have the ability to give Montclair residents and employees the first opportunity for those affordable units. And that's, I think, a very strong positive step to reducing the impacts of that gentrification. So that's kind of why we're doing that, and I think that these numbers really show and support the rationale behind the local preference. So if you want to move on, I'm on page 5. Because of rapidly rising housing costs, it is becoming less viable for residents to live their whole lives in Montclair. I think we already addressed that in number 2. Number 5, that was 4. Number 5, there isn't an equitable distribution of affordable and special needs housing and diversity throughout the township. We did prepare a map, which is shown on page 6. And yes, most of our affordable housing is still in the 3rd and 4th wards. We had our first affordable housing option in the 2nd ward at 256 Park Street. So we got 2 affordable units there. But again, we've had opportunities. We had a developer who was considering building housing, including affordable housing in Upper Montclair. It would have required a 3rd floor on his building, and obviously there was pushback, and in the end, we didn't get any housing on that project, but.
Yeah.
Where was that
That's
located?
the Warner Communications you're talking
Yeah.
about?
Yeah.
So I think, I was relatively new to the planning board then, and when you look at it, there was a handful, basically, of people who came out against that, and I think that we kind of should have fought back a little bit harder on that. And if the same application came before me now, I would be a different person responding to those neighbors,
Yeah.
because what they wanted to do there, looking back at it, was perfect for that site.
Right.
And
What site was it?
the Warner do you know the Warner Communications building? I think
It's
there's a
behind
realtor there
King's-
now.
by King's
Oh,
and-
sure, okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So we lost that opportunity.
Yeah, we did.
And I think when the next opportunity that comes up, it doesn't happen, because, for the affordable housing ordinance to take effect, there has to be a net increase of 5 units. Any project that has a net increase of 5 units, they pay a fee. And non-residential development pays a fee, which is why we have over $2 million in our Affordable Housing Trust Fund that I'm working with the council and the Housing Commission on how to use those funds to create affordable housing. So there's not that many opportunities. We sometimes get 1 unit. In this case, I think we might have gotten maybe 4, maybe 2. But again, every unit counts. The value of an affordable unit is close to $200,000. That's the cost. That was the cost that was
That was the
determined
cost
5
back
years
then,
ago. It's
yeah.
probably higher now.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
I have a question for you, though. So we look, I've said this before, the Acme site. To me, that looks like a perfect site to declare an area in need of redevelopment and do something on that site other than a huge parking lot, a smaller supermarket, and whatever the little stores are back there.
Yeah.
How does something like that happen? How does it happen?
Well, it used to be a gas station, and and that was
No,
before
I
my
don't mean
time.
that. How do you
Oh.
make, you can't make people build, but how do you make it attractive for someone to come in there and do?
Well, we could go, I think that's what was in the housing, in the unified plan, when we adopted it, was to create that as an area for higher density residential development. I don't think we ever called it out as an area in need of redevelopment or a potential area in need of redevelopment, but we did identify it as a place where additional development could occur in Upper Montclair, and we can certainly take another look at that.
Yeah, because it strikes me that there's a low bar to naming something an area of redevelopment.
Well, as you know, it only needs to be, the utilities have to be over
Sewers.
50 years old, so
Yeah.
just about
So
every
place
property in
in
the
town.
township
So it's just a
would
question.
qualify
right.
as an area in need of
Right.
an area in need of rehabilitation.
Rehabilitation, yeah, even redevelopment, I guess.
So,
Yeah.
Read the latest issue of the New Jersey Planner for
Yeah.
something about area in need of redevelopment, because
Okay.
it's become more complicated.
Yeah.
are you talking about the Westfield case?
West Orange.
Oh, I thought it was, there was one in Westfield too.
Oh,
but
there's
yeah, it
one in
was-
West
West
Orange?
Orange was the library, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I saw that. So, any other comments? I'll take note of the A&P site.
Acme, yeah.
Hmm?
Isn't it Acme, right? The-
I'm dating myself.
Oh, yeah.
It used to be A&P.
Yeah.
Yes, it wasn't that long ago.
You know, it's amazing, I went on there's so many little stores that used to be supermarkets.
It was a supermarket.
Yeah, yeah, amazing. There used to be,
Number 6, Montclair lacks an adequate supply of market-rate housing for senior citizens and the disabled throughout the township. The response, as the baby boom generation has reached retirement age, the township senior citizens population has grown significantly, as you can see in Table 7. Those age falling within the age bracket 60 to 64 increased by almost 54%, 65 to 70, or 65 to 69, 28%, and 70 to 74, 66%. So clearly you can see the impact of the baby boom generation in terms of the population age in Table 7. So while there has been no new market rate housing limited to senior citizens, there has been a substantial number of new multifamily housing built that is suitable for seniors as it meets all ADA requirements. And I don't know if I added in here, we do have 4 housing developments in the township. I don't have the number at hand in terms of how many units for seniors that are set aside for affordable senior housing, but we do have quite a few.
Could I ask that this table use census data rather than ACS data, just because, especially for New Jersey, ACS data has been shown to be somewhat shaky compared to census data?
I can certainly do that.
Thank
We've
you.
gone back and forth between ACS and census.
Yeah.
I know HUD accepts ACS on.
I totally get that. It always seems the census comes out and it's telling a different picture than the last
Right.
few years of ACSs. And, yeah, thank
right.
you.
Janice, I have just a couple of things I think that maybe would be helpful to clarify in this. I mean, what is special needs housing?
Oh, okay.
So just
Special- yeah.
define that somewhere?
Well, senior citizen housing is a form of special needs. It's designed to meet the needs of seniors. Special needs housing, you might have housing, it's like group housing.
Yeah, so I think you should state what it is,
Okay.
because, yeah, somewhere or other, because we
What
don't,
falls into
I don't
that
know.
category.
Yeah, what category? And I don't really know, when you say it meets all the ADA requirements,
Uh-huh.
what exactly do you mean there?
Americans
Oh.
with Disability Act, is that what you're talking
Yeah.
about?
Yeah, I mean, I know what it
Yeah.
is, but
Seniors,
what,
well, actually, no,
like the
seniors-
doorknobs and the
Yeah,
wide.
all that stuff.
wide-
They meet that-
Accessible.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
can-
Measure
Yeah,
everything,
yeah, yeah.
ramps,
Wider,
yeah.
the
Yeah, I mean, I
counters
just-
are lower, you know.
I might say something like that, just so people have an idea what you're talking about, why it's important, yeah.
Okay, so define special needs and define ADA.
Give examples, so, yeah.
Okay. Number 7, I think, was integrated into number 5. That has to do with housing that meets the needs of the elderly. Our housing plan tend to repeat it, I mean, the unified plan tends to repeat itself a lot.
Yeah, and on that, as we plan for our seniors that our populations are growing at the moment, I also want to make sure we're planning for the future, such that once that boom has passed, let's say, what do we do with that housing? Does it still work for other folks after
Right.
that? Because we won't need as much designated senior housing. Let's assume we have more than we have at the moment. But how do we transition that?
Well, I think, first of all, as I said, most of the housing that's been built, we have had no new housing just for seniors. It's been multifamily housing that is, as I say, accessible. It's served by elevators. The new housing doesn't have the accessibility issues with ramps and stairs. So somebody who has mobility issues
Mhm.
can get into those units and move in those units.
The easily transition, I think, is basically
Yeah.
where Janet is going with that. It's not like you have ramps instead of staircases or
Right.
things of that nature. They're on one floor.
Right.
And the door frames may be wider, the counters might be a little bit lower, but it's a lot of cosmetic and logistic kind of considerations that make it easier for a senior to live there, but anybody could live there and do, it's not like you would have to convert it back to a non-senior,
Right.
But it's not for disabled people, like you had mentioned, the counters are lower, but I've seen housing where you could fit a wheelchair underneath the counter, so someone in a wheelchair could access the counter, but this is not what you're talking
No,
about here.
for those types of units, the landlords are required to adapt them. So
And-
they're adaptable, so you can just take out that unit
Mm.
and put in a different unit that has the space, lose the
Take out the
cabinet.
cabinet.
So the
Put a
new
different
housing that
cabinet.
we have
Is
has that
adaptable.
ability to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And they
but
have
the things that you
mhm.
can't change.
Yeah, yeah, like the
door
side of the
frames.
door and no
You know.
lintel or whatever that you have to bump over with your
Right.
wheelchair. I'm really conscious of this as I'm getting older.
I'm going to skip numbers 8 and 9 because I think we've already gone over them, and number 9 is just a confusing statement that should be eliminated. Number 10, the current senior bus route has limited service. Again, remember, this was done in 2010, 2011, and that's when we had the jitney that did a somewhat fixed route for the seniors or for commuters during the morning, and then it would pick up seniors for different senior activities. But we now have a different kind of system. We have what's called the Easy Ride system, in which, and this started during COVID, and the township worked with the county to provide this service where seniors who need to get someplace can basically, they sign up. They sign up, and it's for free. So they say, I need to get to the grocery store, I need to get to the doctor's office, and they'll provide these easy ride services to the seniors for free to get them to where they need to be. So it's ultimately flexible, but it's pretty expensive, is my understanding, and we don't know how sustainable it is. That was at least the comment that I got from the woman who manages the senior bus service right now.
Does the county assist with the cost of that?
Yes.
They do.
Yes.
And is that going to go away after the COVID monies are recaptured?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know the long term, but I think it's worth a discussion with, we have a new I did this before we had our new director of senior services, so it's worth a discussion with the new director.
Was the jitney inefficient in terms of times, cost?
Well, it was somewhat limited, and
yeah.
then when you had COVID, nobody would use it,
Yeah.
so we had to switch to a different kind of system. And I think from the planning literature that I've seen, and we've got a couple planners in here, there's this, what's it called, micromobility?
Yeah.
Where you get basically it's on-call public transit. There's a lot of options where it's much more tailored to specific needs, and this is almost a form of that micromobility.
But you're saying it's too expensive to continue, right, Janice? So we might have to reconsider? Is that
It's something, I don't have the
the long and
answer
short
to.
of
It's
it?
something it probably needs to be evaluated.
Okay.
I don't have the answer,
There's something else about this too. I mean, this need can be grouped in with the need to provide better transportation for commuters
Yeah.
to the
Right.
train stations. And we've always talked about having better access between the Upper Montclair Business District and the main business district on Bloomfield Avenue, and also the Montclair State connection, bringing, having better access for the students to bring their presence and
Right.
stuff into town. So,
And
I
also
mean,
the
it's-
south end to train stations, right?
Yeah.
Right,
There's
and
no
it's
train
all,
station.
all of this,
Yeah.
I mean, there's kind of like this need for a local service
Yeah.
that would hit quite a few, you know, if we could collect maybe some supports from various
Right.
grants or underwritings or whatever. But it seems like this isn't just a senior need. It's something where we could get support maybe from other areas, you know.
Yeah.
And this issue came up with the Transportation and Mobility Subcommittee that met. So we can go into, discuss this in more depth at the next meeting where we discuss the report from the Transportation and Mobility Subcommittee.
They'll have options, Janice, at that, we'll have options to discuss at that meeting, or?
Well, I don't know how many, between now and then, I'll reach out to the Senior Services Director and get some information. The committee asked me to get some more information from our parking consultant about that. So it's something we can talk about. There are options, I just haven't, I think at this point, we're not gonna recommend options, we can.
No, I'd just like to be, I'd be curious to know what they are.
Yeah, I know that there's a service called, I keep getting emails from a service called VIA. I don't know if
I
you've
think
getting
they
those same
operate in
emails?
Jersey City. I don't get the emails, but I think they operate in Jersey City.
It's on-call, it's basically on-call public transportation. And it's new,
But is there any kind of local, you know, jitney-type service that we could look into reinstituting now
I mean, we
that
used to have.
COVID protocols are
Yeah, we
eased?
had, and I think we still have a very limited commuter service.
Very limited, right? And it doesn't hit a lot of the areas that the,
It just hits the south end because everything else is considerable. You could basically walk to the train station,
Mhm.
except for the estate section and the south end area where you can't.
You can, it takes some.
but
Yeah.
also on the weekends, I think it would be helpful to get some of the, you know, those services up to the Montclair State area and back, and allow commuters to, within Montclair, to have easy access to all of our various town centers.
Yeah, I think kind of using transportation infrastructure and mechanisms to better stitch together the community
Yeah.
is something everyone can agree would be helpful and beneficial.
Especially when the trains are out
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
Saturday and Sunday.
Yeah.
You know, it's
Yeah.
tough.
And so I think, yeah, and incorporating that into the different types of micromobility, whether that's encouraging bike lanes, alternative means of transportation, making sure our sidewalks are well-maintained and well-lit so people feel safe walking. I think that all plays into it, like really thinking about how people get around town and making it easier for them to use ways that aren't cars
Right.
in any form.
Oh, sorry. For years, Clifton, the next-door neighbor to Montclair, has had what they call the Spanish buses. I don't know if anybody here is familiar with that. They have them in Clifton, I think they had them in Union City.
Oh, they're very popular in Hudson County.
And they're terrific. These just little vans
Right.
transport you to New York. And I don't know why they've never come into Montclair, because especially now that New Jersey Transit has limited route. Well, I guess, but no, they're,
So we kind of
Clifton.
we kind of had DeCamp. DeCamp would take.
Yeah, right, but now that we
DeCamp
don't
filled
have
that-
DeCamp.
If it's getting to New York City, DeCamp did that.
Yeah, but now I
But
really
like
believe we should look at these Spanish
In Queens,
buses.
they had the van service.
Yeah, well, that's somewhat similar, yeah,
Yeah.
but they're really, I mean, they've been going on for decades in Clifton. And my other point is about the, the senior buses and things. They're not needs-based. There's plenty of our seniors who can afford to pay for, a taxi or a bus or something, but because this is free, people take advantage of it. But I think, that, if this is beyond, we can't pay for this anymore, then people should pay for these buses, because many of our seniors can afford
It
them.
could be something that's subsidized,
Right.
you know,
Or-
and so that it's a lower cost.
For the people who need it,
Right,
not, right.
West Orange also has a pretty robust jitney service specifically for getting to the train stations. They've got, I think, 5 different routes throughout the town to take you to various train stations. And so that's more a commuter-focused transportation service, but
Yeah,
it's another very local example of
right.
municipally operated transit.
Mm-hmm.
And at one point, I don't know if they still do this, but Summit was partnering with Uber and subsidizing Uber rides to
Right.
the train station as a way to
Right.
avoid cars, coming into the downtown.
It'd be a shared Uber?
I don't know if it was shared or not. I'm don't recall, several years ago, they implemented that program.
To address a parking problem and not, you
Yes.
still have the traffic, yeah.
Correct.
okay.
Okay, so number 11, those are very good ideas. Number 11, Montclair does not have sufficient options for community gardens and small-scale farming. I did try to adopt an ordinance for community gardens. The council decided not to, that there was no need to adopt that ordinance. Essentially, community gardens are a permitted use. Small-scale farming is a permitted use. We don't prohibit it. So, I don't know how much of an issue it is if it's something that we permit anyway. So, and then number 12, the farmer's market is a great asset. However, it is only open at one location and only during summer and early fall. Well, again, that was in 2010, 2011. Now it's open all year round. And we had a second farmer's market, I think it was pre-COVID, over on South Park Street. I don't think it was that successful because I think it was open on Tuesdays and then they stopped. So I think the fact that we're always open to, fresh food options.
Janice, does the farmer's market generate any income for the town?
I don't know. I have no idea.
Okay.
I think it's a nonprofit organization sanctioned by the town because we don't allow organizations to use our parking lots except for the farmer's market.
Maybe there's some permitting,
Yeah.
expenses,
And I know it's
licensing
connected to the town.
So since you said that, Janice, those two parking lots are town lots, or are they New Jersey Transit
No,
lots?
those are town lots.
Okay, thank you.
Recommendations. Number 1, these were the recommendations that were in the unified plan. 1, encourage a mix of housing types to fit the needs of all households. I think we've continued to do that. There's a need for smaller 1- and 2-family homes that will provide entry-level housing for families. That was the conclusion of the subcommittee. The township should consider allowing larger lots to be subdivided to create smaller lots if affordability restrictions are put in place to provide for workforce housing. So, just some thoughts on that one. 2, ensure the provision of affordable housing. This is still valid. Rising household incomes in Montclair as a whole have reduced the percentage of cost burden households. I have all these tables in there. Still, almost 2,300 renters spend more than 30% of their household income on rent, and over 1,800 homeowners spend more than 30% of their household income on mortgages. See on table 7. Beyond that, we know that there's always a demand for affordable housing because our affordable prices and rents are pretty high.
Janice?
Yes.
Is there, should you mention anything about our fair share housing
What do you mean
maybe
by
changing?
fair share? I don't know what you mean.
You know, the law, what's it called?
She's talking about possible Mount Laurel obligations.
Yeah,
in
no.
the
Oh, yeah,
fourth
okay, the
wave.
2025.
What's it called?
Fourth round.
The 4th round obligations, we can talk about that, but that's actually addressed in the housing element, which we're gonna be talking about. There's a housing element to the master plan.
Okay.
Completely separate, this is really land use. So I'd rather talk about that as in the housing element.
Well, Mount Laurel could change our land use requirements. No, Mount Laurel obligations could force us to change our land use policies.
I don't think we're going to.
I don't necessarily think one way or the other, but it's certainly something we should be prepared for.
Right,
Yeah.
and that's why I have the house, I'm pushing the housing commission to, giving them the first crack at the housing element fair share plan, which was done in 2009. And then they'll come with their comments to you, and then we'll
we have-
address that.
yeah.
Clearly, 2025 is right around the corner, as far as I'm concerned. In the and I think I've probably told you in the past, Montclair is an urban-aid municipality, and according to the Mount Laurel affordable housing requirements in New Jersey, our obligation is 0. So
We don't
Nevertheless,
expect that to change.
nevertheless, we
But
have
wait a
one
minute,
of the
Janice,
most.
but our obligation is zero because we've met their affordable.
No, because
Oh.
we're an urban aid municipality.
Well, what does that
It's
mean?
zero
then?
because of that. But we have a very robust program, and we continue to advance affordable housing. So I'm not concerned about it. I just want to make sure that we're prepared, okay? And if we lose our urban aid status, what's going to be the affordable housing impact on Montclair? Right now, there's no easy answer to that. It would be calculated according to a process that was put in place by the Middlesex County judge, I believe, that is now widely accepted as the way to,
Is it Jacobson?
I think so.
Mercer County, yeah.
I've heard talk about it. I actually haven't seen how that's calculated. So it's something that I'm trying to get current on. So if it's applied to Montclair, I want to know what the numbers would be.
Sure.
And if you have, anybody has copies of what that process is, I mean, that would be very helpful. I've just heard talk about it, but I don't actually have it. And I think it involves eConsult or whoever doing some new numbers
That I'm not sure about.
to deter, whatever. It's a very complicated process.
Yes.
Number 3, expand supply of housing for senior citizens. That was one of the recommendations. The subcommittee suggested that this be expanded to include disabled and clarified to ensure that housing is accessible. The recently adopted rent control ordinance limits annual rent increases for senior citizens to 2.5%. This creates a disincentive for landlords to rent to senior citizens because otherwise they would have a rent increase of, I believe, 4%. This township should provide jitney service to seniors and commuters using an electric bus. Anyway, just a lot of thoughts that came out of the subcommittee regarding that. Number 4, expand fresh fruit access throughout the township. We have 2 grocery stores.
We actually have 3.
We had 3. The Pathmark is closed, so we will
No.
have 3 once.
Acme, Whole Foods, and King's.
Kings, yeah.
Kings, yeah.
Oh, yeah. How can I forget about King's? I go there for lunch, whenever I need a good salad. All right, the township has 3 grocery stores, and the Pathmark, which served the southern half of the township, closed in 2015 and has been designated as a food desert by NJDCA. The township should continue to work with the property owner to secure a supermarket at this location. Seasonal fresh produce is provided through a weekend farmers market and local community gardens, which are
Okay.
permitted uses.
I had a comment on this.
Okay.
All right, my comment is this is so misleading. The issue is not a lack of grocery stores, but a lack of transportation from the south end of town. The township has 12 grocery stores within a 3-mile radius of Lackawanna Plaza. Putting a grocery store at Lackawanna Plaza, for example, will not address the transportation issue. People from the south end of town still can't get to Lackawanna Plaza. Someone from the south, okay. The township should be trying to figure out how they want to address this transportation issue. It is to the advantage for a developer, not needy residents, to have a grocery store at Lackawanna Plaza. The New York Times recently cited that having a grocery store in a mixed-use development actually serves to help the developer keep rents high. So I think, I think that response needs to be changed to take into some of the points that I've made.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we've been talking about a supermarket at Lackawanna, like, the whole mission was to put a
It was.
real supermarket back, so I didn't read that until you read it. But that completely eviscerates what we've been talking about with respect to Lackawanna.
Oh,
Get-
I don't know if it does that.
Well,
I do think
it
that
does- they don't
Lackawanna
need-
Plaza needs a supermarket.
It's gonna increase the
and I think that
rents.
it
I
needs-
mean, the
Yep, I
supermarket is for the neighborhood. It's not,
The supermarket there needs to be a supermarket in that area of
Yeah.
town.
Why?
Because people need a supermarket, and I don't think it's totally a transportation issue.
If you look at the DCA information, and I looked at the maps, the problem, where the food desert is basically at the south end of town. most of the other areas have access to a supermarket. And if you're at the south end of town, you still can't get to Lackawanna Plaza unless you have
I'm
transportation.
not disputing that
Yeah.
transportation would be helpful, and I think it's a very good idea to have transportation. I agree with the transportation need, but I do disagree that we don't need a supermarket.
People used to walk to the Pathmark.
Absolutely. Well, Acme and Pathmark were there. They were both walkable. That
When I
neighborhood,
worked for Pathmark, Pathmark was in a constant communication with the town because our shopping carts
were everywhere.
were
Everywhere, I know.
evidence that people walked to Pathmark.
Yeah, and that
Yeah.
neighborhood is there was recently some numbers in terms of where people have fewer cars. It is
Right.
that neighborhood. So,
Right.
people maybe in the more suburban locations, in the single-family zones, are gonna have cars, and they'll probably drive, but I think that neighborhood should not be summarily dismissed as not needing a supermarket. That is the whole point of the redevelopment plan, is to put it, I mean, that's my opinion.
Well, no.
Is to
Well,
put
I-
a supermarket back and
Yeah,
a good one, not a, and I've spoken about this before, not a wannabe supermarket that doesn't have fresh produce and a good,
Right.
full line of
It
foods.
needs a viable supermarket,
Right.
but I think that a supermarket in that location, if it's accessible, the thing that I'm most concerned about with what the plan is now is that they're building a supermarket that really is not accessible from Bloomfield Avenue and not accessible from Grove Street and is hidden from view in that is, I think, because what you need is a location where people who are not just Montclairites will come, because we haven't got a population that's gonna, on its own, take care of a supermarket. You know, the top right is in a visible situation, the Kings is in a visible situation, all the
I-
supermarkets that thrive are visible.
And honestly
they-
speaking,
they-
Pathmark was kind of hidden in the train station, but that's all there was there, aside from the few stores that were on the mall. So it wasn't covered with apartments and other amenities going on around
you
it
had the
that
Tully walk
that
right
obscured
through
it, so.
But my point is still, it's the transportation issue from the south end of town to the
Needs to
Lackawanna
be
Plaza.
solved. We
Needs
agree
to
on
be
that.
solved, that's it.
We agree
Yeah.
on that, it's just that I don't want to sacrifice the idea
Well,
that we
it-
don't need a supermarket there.
The
at
developer
the
will not let
Lackawanna.
you sacrifice that, because it's to his benefit to have a supermarket
I
there.
wonder
Not
why it's not.
necessarily.
That's what the time
I've
said.
figured out why that has not been excited enough to make that supermarket visible and accessible. That's the thing that I'm puzzled with.
Without dumping hundreds and hundreds of apartments.
Right. And not
That's what she
accessible.
said.
I mean, the idea that you cannot access a supermarket from Bloomfield Avenue, that there's no way for a car to cut in from Bloomfield Avenue or Grove Street. The only way is to go into a parking deck, which is from Lackawanna, whatever. And it's the idea that we're not focusing on an accessible supermarket that is attractive to people who are coming up east and west on Bloomfield, east and west on Bloomfield Avenue and north and south on Grove Street is absolutely absurd.
Well, that's why I said over and over again, it needs to be where the TD Bank is.
Right, that would
That's
be
the right
great.
corner for
That
it.
would be great,
I-
but
I think a quality supermarket can have an attractiveness all its own, though, as evidenced by the Essex Green ShopRite, which is in the most insane location of any supermarket I've ever seen. It's not visible to anything, and you have to take 17 turns to get there, and it's somehow always jam-packed. So I think if you're a quality supermarket, you'll do well. I think it's important to consider that Lackawanna Plaza, the street, as currently exists, seems to, if the redevelopment plan goes through, become a driveway for this project. And so I think it's going to be pretty accessible from Bloomfield Avenue. You're just using what's essentially a longer driveway, the current Lackawanna Plaza, to get
I'm
there.
not so sure, but I think we'll have to agree to disagree on that.
That's fair,
Because it
yeah.
just really is not that accessible. If you're a local resident, you know where it is, and you know how to get there, you know which street to take. But if you're just a person who would like to discover it on the way to and from Bloomfield Avenue, you can't see it. By the time you get to Lackawanna Plaza, you passed it. By the time you can see the supermarket, you passed the access if you're driving east on it.
That could
So
be-
it seems to me that needs better planning.
And I don't-
We just have to disagree about it.
I don't see how a supermarket, quite honestly, would allow that. because one of their, I mean.
Allow
them-
inaccessibility?
Allow them not to be seen.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
Because they want to be seen, they want people, they want to attract the people who are driving by to come in, you know? So I don't understand how the developers would get away with.
They seem to be doing that, though.
Yeah, I don't understand how that works.
And one of the things they said about Pathmark was that it would have done better if it had more visibility, but this is totally ignored as an issue with this one.
Okay,
Beating that to death?
number
You can
5.
beat it a little.
We're almost done. I've got two more. Number 5, maintain character of residential neighborhoods.
Ooh, I think we talked about that.
I think we already talked about that.
Definitely.
I think,
I just wanted to add one more thing.
yeah,
Sorry, but in number 5, I had another sentence, historic elements of the neighborhood needs to be considered.
okay.
One of the
And
things
it-
that never gets mentioned when we talk about Lackawanna Plaza is the fact that there's that Grove Street, on Grove Street, there's this grade level railroad track that backs up traffic already. And when they talk about building all of this, nobody ever mentions the fact that we've got an at-grade railroad crossing right there on Grove
At Claremont,
Street.
you mean, Claremont?
Claremont Grove Pond.
Yeah, they
It's a-
did. The
it's a-
traffic study mentions
It's going
that.
across
It freezes
Grove
up.
Street,
Yeah,
right.
no,
And
no.
Right.
there's traffic already backed up on
Right.
Grove Street, all the way past Chestnut, and
Yeah.
every time there's a train, so.
Yeah, well, the
Right.
traffic study does, remember, they did talk about
But
that.
it
doesn't.
doesn't backtrack, back up the opposite way, back to Bloomfield Avenue. But that it backs it up the other way, but between the tracks and Bloomfield Avenue, there's enough escape routes.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's what the,
Yeah,
that's what the
yeah.
neighbors are worried about, that
Yeah.
everybody's
That's
going to
right.
be
The
escaping to
neighbors are
Clover
worried about
Hill.
the escape
Yeah.
route.
Right.
Right.
But that's why traffic doesn't back up to Bloomfield Avenue like it backs up on the other side. But
So-
sometimes it backs all the way down to what is it, Chestnut? Yeah,
With a light.
yeah.
So just to simplify this, I think that number 5, maintain the character of residential neighborhoods, is really best expressed in the neighborhood character section of the master plan. We already have a whole section dedicated to that, so we don't really need to repeat it here. And just like number 6, promote tree conservation, we have a conservation plan that talks extensively on conserving trees. So, I think that that's where it's properly addressed in our conservation plan. And
And-
again, trying to condense this so that it's a much more manageable.
And I think that, you know, as a result of the conversation tonight, we've got to see if maintaining the character of the neighborhoods,
Right.
just how significant an issue that is.
Well, I'll make
And
that.
what we're willing to bend with it and,
Well,
or do
well-
away with it, or
Well-
modify it, or whatever.
I would say our takeaway was more that what makes up the character of the neighborhood has been assumed to be
Right.
one thing, and it may not be solely that.
Right.
Right? So you may be able to fit a two-family house with a hidden second entrance well into the character of an otherwise largely single-family neighborhood without impacting that character.
I'll go along with that.
I mean, I
So-
would say my neighborhood, it was largely built with two-family houses, but they look like one-family
Right.
houses. So
A lot
that's
of them do.
certainly possible. I mean, I don't know why that doesn't happen more. Anyway,
So the neighborhood character subcommittee I have Kevin Ortiz, Michael Graham. I suggested that you be on this
I'm
subcommittee.
happy to, yeah.
And I actually throw your name in, John, on this as well, unless somebody else wants to be on this subcommittee?
let me ask you a question. Is, the Historic Preservation Commission is looking at just their section?
Well, right now, they're working on the historic preservation element of the master plan.
Nothing to do with neighborhood character, because they are somewhat intertwined a little bit, I guess.
Well, that's why we have Mike on
So
this.
Mike is-
And it would
that's
have
why
to be
he got
related to
recruited?
That's why I really
historic
wanted
elements,
Mike on
yeah.
this
Yeah, I'm in. I got you.
So, at the next meeting, we'll do transportation and mobility, where we have, and then I'm going to try and get a meeting. I have to do the report first, then I'll set up a meeting for neighborhood character. And that leaves the last two, economic development and the arts, and infrastructure and utilities. So we'll get to those over the summer. Okay? There's
Sorry,
only so
Janice,
much-
did you say next meeting we're doing transportation and mobility? The revisions that we,
The transportation, and were you on that subcommittee?
yes, I was. We did it already. Didn't we do last meeting?
No, you did land use and parking. This
Oh,
is-
excuse me.
You're not part of this sub, I didn't include you in this meeting.
Some,
So, next meeting, I can put this up, because I did a report, the subcommittee met, we talked
Parking is
about.
adjacent to the transportation.
Yeah, so, I'm trying to take this in manageable chunks, for you and for me.
I think so far it's been working out, from my perspective.
Yeah, the meetings have been great, the subcommittee meetings have been, it's like a roundtable discussion, and I think I'm glad that we have the time to talk about this, so it gives me a lot of direction, and the public is watching.
yeah. And I've mentioned this a few times, but it's always the best when we're able to actually plan rather than being reactive to the specific small application in front of us.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it takes time to work through all these things and kind of figure out a starting point, really.
Right.
You know, as to, you know, where we're going to, what position we think is appropriate to take in 2023, you know, and then pursuing feedback on
At
that.
some point, the public will be
Yeah.
giving the feedback, right?
Yeah,
Yep.
so.
Okay.
Okay, so that's all I have for the presentation tonight.
All right.
I think we have bills.
I
You
didn't
didn't
receive
see
them, so
them.
I don't know.
Well, it's just,
It doesn't mean we can't approve them, it's just I can't say I read them and.
it's one
That
bill.
means we can't approve it.
We can
It's
hold, we
only-
can hold
it's
off to
only-
the next time.
It's only one bill, and it was really for Dennis Gavin to represent us in the Lackawanna Plaza lawsuit. So, which I think should be finished by now.
I was like, that's done now,
I
right?
think we're done.
Okay.
We could pay that, couldn't we?
Yeah, we can.
How much is it?
$942,
All right, we can.
which I thought was very reasonable.
Yeah, we can.
Okay. All right.
Wait, do we have to vote? And
Is there a motion there's a motion to approve by John, is there a second?
second? No.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All opposed? I mean, a favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, everyone.
But, you know, everybody was paying attention to that, nobody said aye.